Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on the 23rd of June 2020 for Vision Australia's check-in and chat session on gaming through coding. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Thanks so much for joining us today. Now, if you can't stay for this full session, that's okay because a recording of the webinar can be accessed later via our webpage at visionaustralia.org/ check in and chat. Today's webinar on gaming through coding, we'll be sharing tips on Swift playgrounds, Ballard, Code Jumper, programming, robots and drones, Xcode for Macs, scripting through JAWS, and lots more. Now, if you have any questions, please send them through using the chat box. If you're using a screen reader, you can access that chat function through keystroke Alt H. I'm really excited to introduce our speaker. David Woodbridge is the National Commercial Assistive Technology Advisor for Vision Australia, and he's been with VA since 1990. Over this time, David has assisted people who are blind or have low vision in their homes, educations, their work setting, and I think David will be the first person to say that he really loves seeing people take advantage of the benefits of using assistive technology. Amongst his many achievements, David is a key commentator on all things tech. So I'm sure some listeners have heard David's voice. He produces a number of tech podcasts, and he's also an Apple ambassador. David, so great to have you here today.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on when you're accessing the webinar.
Yeah. Now, thank you everyone for joining us. Now, let's start off with a very basic question because we're probably going to have people with varied levels of experience on the line. What is coding and programming, David?
Right, so the best way that I'd like to explain coding or programming, which are effectively the same thing, is simply giving a computer, and whatever that might be, a set of instructions to follow to perform a specific task or function. So when you think about your home environment, your computers in your home are things like your washing machine, your dryer, dishwasher, microwave, oven, my coffee machine, which I keep trying to avoid the fact that it cost $3,500 when I first bought it.
Oh, wow.
um, so, when you get a new kitchen, you've got to buy a new toy for it. So it was actually pretty cool. So look, all those things have programming. So the washing machine, it gets programmed to, it starts off and it puts the water in and then it starts agitating and then it starts doing other stuff. The same for the dryer. My coffee machine turns on, spits out the water to clean its little self out apparently, which I always forget to put the drain underneath to catch the water and all those little things. So they're all instructions that tell the machine what to do, because people just assume that coding and programming are things to do with the desktop computer, the laptop computer, the smartphone. But it's literally any electronic thing that actually has to follow a certain, like I said, a number of instructions to be able to do something.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point that you clarified. I have to confess that I was absolutely someone that thought that it was just around computers and whatnot. And what I'm hearing is that if it's tech, it's around controlling any type of device that involves some level of technology, which is quite incredible. And you've mentioned a few particular programs that listeners might be interested to get to know a bit more about. We've got Swift Playgrounds, which I think is more for advanced individuals with this tool, Ballard and Code Jumper. Tell us a bit about each of them and to our listeners who would be suitable to utilize these programs.
Yep. So what I normally do is when I do my coding workshops, because I did about 3 or 4 last year. So before I sort of introduce, I guess, Ballyland, which is the basic app for the iPad and the iPhone, what we also tend to do, and this is the bit that I love, is getting a bunch of kids together and saying, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get somebody in the audience, normally it's one of the staff members, to basically, crow like a chook 3 times or a rooster, walk to the door, bang on the door and walk back again and crow 3 times again or something weird and funny like that. So you actually get the children to step through what would be like. So you have to say, okay, the person is sitting down, they have to stand up, they have to turn in the right direction, they have to walk a certain number of steps, they have to do this, they have to do that. So that's programming, getting used to that sort of logic, sequencing and trial and error type stuff. And then the other thing that we then do from that particular point of view is we get some, let me just grab it off my chair here. This is, again, before we get to battling on the iPad. So I'm holding this up for people that can't see the screen. And this is just purely it's a Lego base, and I've got little Lego bits on it. So again, if I was to say, well, I've got whatever this grid is, a 7x7 grid, and let's pretend that we've got a figure that's on, row 1, column 5. How do we get another little figure to go over and say hello to that particular figure? So again, it's using that physical play mechanism to get the concept of, again, sequencing, problem solving, and trial and error. Because one of the great things about programming, it really teaches patience, because a lot of the time when you try these programs out, it doesn't work the first time you do it. And you think, oh, that didn't work, I'll try it again. And you keep trying and you keep testing and you keep trial and error until it actually works. And that's the great thing about coding, is that it really teaches you patience. And then when you transfer from, the gaming, the Lego onto the iPad app, like I said, there's 3 apps. They're called Ballyland 1, 2, and 3. So Ballyland code 1, 2, and 3. And what the Ballyland is a group of characters, and they're called the Ballylanders. And you've got like a little helicopter, you've got a car, you've got a little ball with a bell on it, and so on. And you have to get the characters, the little Ballylanders, to do things for you on the screen. So what I've got here, and if you search for Ballylanders through the Sonic Kids website, they've got a place where you can download 3D models. So again, I'm holding up a 3D printed grid, and this is simply a 3x3 grid. And I simply downloaded the 3D printer files of the Sonic Kids website and gave them to locally here up in Gosford on Central Coast. They printed them out for me. So here, what I've got Wheelie, which is one of the cars. So let's say, for example, Wheelie was in row 1, column 1, but then I had Tinkerball. This is a little ball. She's got a little bell on top. And
So you've got, what do you got in your right hand? You've got 2 white balls. Yeah.
2 balls, yep. One of which is like a little Tinkerball with a bell. And the other one and it's probably a bit hard to see in the camera, but it's got 2 wheels on either side.
2 wheels connected to a white ball so it can rotate. Yeah.
And he's got a nose.
And it's got a nose.
Important to have the nose.
Good detail.
That's
you can smell his way around the board.
That's it. And look, also too, he's got to point in the right direction.
Yep. Yep.
His nose was pointing the other way, he'd be running off the board in this case. So, so again, the instructions would be, well, look, what coding sequence do we have to get if the car was here and the ball was on the bottom right-hand side?
Yeah.
Get the instructions to get him down there. So
anyone that's watching right now, David's just pointed to the top left-hand corner. If the gadgets were to start there, how would you move them to the bottom right-hand corner from left to right? Basically, correct. That's what you've shown.
Yeah, that's right. And the reason why we use these grids is because if you can imagine, if you're a screen reader user, so you're using your voiceover on your iPhone or your iPad, when you're starting to use coding applications, you can imagine hearing column 1, row 1, column 2, row 1, column 3, row 1. It can get a little bit overwhelming. So the way this grid helps out is that you physically work it out on the grid here first, and then you transfer, if you like, that tactile spatial knowledge onto the digital grid on the iPad or the iPhone screen. So this really helps as a beginning tool to understand what you're doing on a digital system. And that's what the Ballylander code apps are so fantastic about. And they're all self-voicing. You don't need to use voiceover on the iPhone or iPad, but this tactile stuff really does help. So that's the Ballylanders on the iPhone and the iPad. The other really cool thing that people love now, and this is Code Jumper. And Code Jumper, what Code Jumper is, it's a hub that I'm currently holding in my hand. And this hub has 4 ports coming off it. We've got 1 port on the side, 2 ports on the front, another port on the side here again. And what you can do is when you turn on this hub and it runs through some software on my Surface Pro Windows laptop, you plug in these really cool modules. Now these modules are almost like a mouse in your hand, and they've got a cable coming off them. And this one that I've got in my hand is called the PlayPod. And what the PlayPod does is I can get my hub, plug it in, and then what I can do is the bottom, one of the controls on the bottom here, the round one, I can just turn around and spin it. That selects different sounds, and the other one, which has got like a very serrated rounding part of the actual knob, is to adjust the speed, so it goes very fast, very slow, or sort of in between. And what the deal is that every pod is a line of code. So when we come and think about my instructions to children, my grid instructions, we're looking at one line of code. We're saying move from this particular cell to the next one. Well, when we're now getting more advanced, we're saying this is my first pod, and this first pod might say the first part of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So the first pod might just say twinkle, so that's line 1. And then I think, okay, so I've got to now plug in another one. So I get my second play pod, I plug into the back of the first one, and now I've got 2 physical lines of code. I've got code number 1, or pod number 1, says twinkle. Next one says twinkle twinkle again, and so on. So through this physical play again, you're building up a child's ability to be able to code. And what this PlayPod allows you to do, the actual hub itself, is that you can play each line of code, i.e. each one of these pods. So it might say line 1, play twinkle at 1 times speed. Line 2, which is pod 2, play twinkle twinkle at 1.5 times speed, and so on. So again, you're building up the code. You can play it back line by line. You can play the whole sequence if you like. And the nice thing about this is that if you're not used to using a computer, you don't have to use the software running on the computer. You can purely play with this. Now you might be thinking, well, this sounds pretty simple. The really cool thing about the Code Jumper kit is it's got 8 of these pods. You've also got loops, so you can actually loop the code around and do all sorts of weird and wonderful things. You can add variables to make it do certain things at different times. You can merge different parts of the code together and quite a few other things. So again, you're building up your sophistication by being able to mix and match all these different play pods with Code Jumper.
That's really great that you have identified that. Like, that's a great place for a beginner to start with, and how they can build their learning through that and then move through to some of the more advanced programs like Swift Playgrounds. What are the, if there are people listening, what are the costs like with these kind of technologies?
It's varied. So basically the way it works is, so Lego's Lego, so you can do what you like with Lego. The Buddyland Code Jumper apps, and I think Thea, who's the main developer, at one stage was offered them for free because of the COVID-19 going on. But I think before that, purchase-wise, there was something like a whopping $4 per application. When you get onto the Code Jumper kit itself, because they've got all these modules and it's all electronic, it's really aimed at more of an educational institution, so a school.
Right. Okay.
It's, you know, it's around about $1,700. It's about $50 per, you know, play pod, loop pod, that sort of stuff. So it is quite expensive. But when we start looking at more of the iPad and the iPhone, so like the Ballyland Code 1 and Code 2, when you put those apps on, all you need is an iPhone or an iPad, and then it'll just work out of the box. So let's say you bought an iPad for, I don't know, $500 or $600. Then you've got the ability to be able to actually not only use Ballyland Code 1 and Code 1 to Code 3, but then you start looking at Swift Playgrounds, and then we get on to the more exciting stuff about, you know, drones and robots and that sort of stuff. So You can go from very, very basic, also including Code Jumper, and then start looking at the more electronic stuff to do with iPads, iPhones, and of course the Mac.
Yep. Nice. I just want to mention that if you are listening, you can see there's a lot of people online at the moment. If you do have any questions, whether they're basic or advanced, please send them through via the chat box. And if you're using a screen reader, you can access the chat function through Alt H. I would personally be really, really happy if we could stump David today because he is such a guru in this area. So that's what I'm hoping for. Really good segue that you mentioned around robots and drones. What are the type of programming involved with these tools or technologies, I should say?
So I mentioned Swift Playgrounds. So Swift Playgrounds is one of the main coding mechanisms for programming, particularly iPhone apps and iPad apps, is called Swift. So Swift's actually a programming language, again, to make apps that run on your iPhone, your iPad, or iPod Touch do something. And of course, the way to learn coding, again, is to play. And what Swift Playgrounds does, it's got different worksheets, if you want to call them that, or different playgrounds that you can play in. And I'll get onto the playgrounds for the drone and the robot in a minute. But the basic one is called Hello Byte. And of course, being a computer, it's BYTE, as in computer byte. And what you have to do is get your little cute character byte to travel around a grid and, you know, collect gems, find where the portal is, turn switches on and off electronically, if you like, and do all those sort of cool things. And while you're playing with your character byte, and you do hear all this really cool sound effects, and you know, he waves his hands when you get it right, and he gets a bit sad when you maybe don't get it quite right, and so on. While you're doing all that sort of stuff, you're learning. Now, the Playgrounds application itself and all these playgrounds to do with the Swift Playgrounds are absolutely free. You just download the actual playground and go for your life using it. And the really cool thing about the Swift Playgrounds Learn to Code 1, Learn to Code 2 is that people like, or places like Vision Australia and other places overseas, they've produced tactile braille diagrams, because again, you can imagine if you've got a grid on the screen visually and you've got all these different gems or jewels on the screen, you've got your character location, you've got walls blocking you, so you've got to walk around another way on the grid. That can get a bit overwhelming. So things like these braille tactile diagrams, which Vision Australia can produce for people, make it a lot easier to use. But really the cool thing, one of the favorite playgrounds that I first started with last year was my little friend here. Now I'm holding up, now you had a really good way of explaining this, and I think you said it was basically 4 spheres connected all together.
Yeah. Yep. And it's blue and it's got like like multiple eyes. It's probably the wrong word.
And I've just turned him on too.
Oh, wow.
Howdy do. Oh, there he goes.
Wow.
And what he's also got, and this is my son did this. You can actually, hey yourself, Mr. Dash. You can actually put braille. You can actually put Lego on top of him. And the reason why he's spinning his wheels at the moment, and I might just turn him off because he's trying to work out what's going on because he's not on the ground. So the way this works is you load up your Dash playground in Swift Playgrounds, and you've literally got this blank canvas, if you like a word processor, and you've got to give Dash instructions, because without these instructions, he doesn't move. He just sits there and goes, oh, and makes up little sounds and turns his head occasionally. So, and they're very simple commands like move forward, move back, move left, move right. And then you can put other things in there, like you can tell Dash to move forward 100 times if you really wanted to, or you can make him spin around infinitely in a circle if you really wanted to do that as well. So it's all about making him move around. He's also got lights, so you can make him flash his lights, and he also has some cool sound effects. He's got like a beeping car sound effect and a few other really cool ones as well. And you can just get him to do all sorts of really cool ones. And when I was programming him, I just thought I'll give myself a bit of a challenge. So I've got one of those dining room tables that you can extend out to it for a 10-seater. So I thought, I wonder if I can get him to actually to go along the edge of the dining room table without falling off the end, and see if I can get him to go to the end of it, come back around and come back to me. And he did. and
Cool.
he didn't fall off the table.
That's really cool.
Which was very cool. So it was just programming him to just do that, all that sort of cool stuff. So when I did this in the coding workshop, what we did with the kids was we said, all right, we've set up a maze on the floor. We got some cushions on the floor. I mean, it was a bit of a maze. And now we said, you've now got to program this robot to go through that maze. And we had people in teams with a robot each. And we said, we want to see how long it takes you to code to get the Dash robot through the maze. And you'll get a special prize on the least amount of instructions. Because one of the things about coding is you don't want to put too many lines in your code because things slow down a bit. And so we awarded people prizes that could actually code, make the least amount of instructions to do what you wanted to do. And that was really, really cool. And you just had the children doing things like, come on, Dash, you're going the wrong way. No, let's stop. And of course, talking about trial and error, it's like, I think you didn't mean Dash to go forward 25 times because he's trying to go through the pillow and he won't go anywhere. So, so that was really great. So he's just a nice little basic robot. Price-wise, he's only about $250, so he's not too expensive. And he's an educational robot that we find, at least here in New South Wales, that most schools use, because one of the problems for blind and low vision people is that when you come to learn coding in schools, the apps that they tend to use are not very blind or low friendly. So the thing about Swift Playgrounds is because you're literally typing in or choosing the code from a drop-down list, it's absolutely accessible with speech output, braille, or large print. And that's why we use Swift Playgrounds to teach coding, because it is so accessible. And my other, and this is now my other little favorite one. And I can remember I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and every time I picked up a new gadget, I kept saying it's my favorite, but every bit of my technology is always my favorite one.
Yep.
So
What have we got there? Oh, this is a drone.
the drone.
It's like a little, to anyone that's watching, it's, I'm going to do my best to AD this. It's, it's got 4 spinny wheels with a middle component, and it's twice the size of your palm.
That's it.
So it's not massive, and it probably looks only like 100 grams. It looks very light from here.
It is very light, yeah. He doesn't have wheels, he has propeller blades.
I'm so sorry.
Hey, so I'll just fly my my drone up in the air with his wheels, shall I?
Yeah, all right. This is the thing, isn't it? I'm learning so much today.
You're doing well. So he's a quadcopter. So he's got 4 blades, and he's got a little camera at the front. And yes, if you were using the app that my boys can do because they're sighted, they can fly him independently with they can see what's happening through the camera. And he simply just plugs into power to charge up. He's only got a complete flying time of 13 minutes. So I've got about another 6 batteries because I tend to go through them too quick. And again, I would load up and it's really funny because the actual playground for this one is called I'm just trying to get the proper name, the space playground, because effectively what you're supposed to do with this space playground is you're supposed to pretend that you're at a space station and you need to fly your drone around the space station. You're avoiding all the landing ramps and the blah, blah, blah. Well, I just ignore any of that and I just do it myself. So, and again, it's telling the drone what to do. So take off, hover, land, fly forward a certain amount, go up in the air, turn left, turn right, turn at an angle, do a barrel roll, all the sort of stuff you would do with a drone. And for me as a blind person, it means that I can independently, even though I'm telling the drone what to do exactly, I can fly a drone independently myself. So what I did in one of my podcasts, I got this little guy with the drone to fly around my backyard, and I followed him by just walking next to him.
Yeah.
So I got him to travel up the backyard on the footpath. He whizzed up and over the back shed. He circumnavigated our back tree, because I thought, well, what else would you do with a drone unless it was to circumnavigate something? He then came down and inspected our garden bed. He then circumnavigated, did a bit of a loop around our clothesline. And then he came back and landed, hopefully where I told him where to land, which he did. And then I very carefully asked him to fly up about 20 meters because these drones are so light. I didn't want him flying too high and get blown off course because then I'd have to find him again. But again, I can't use that app that my sons use to fly the drone because it's very visual. They're literally using if you like, a joystick through touch on the
Hmm.
screen. But because I can program exclamation mark the drone in Swift Playgrounds, I can fly this little guy wherever I want to. So it's absolutely brilliant. It is classified as a toy. So it's not like a commercial drone that's horrendously expensive. This guy again was about $250. Really nice to use, simple to fly, and it does make that drone sound, which drives my wife batty because she can't stand the outside. And because it's got a safety mechanism on it, you can fly it inside. So when
Yeah, right.
I flew it around the house, I did have a couple of issues that I found where our lights were hanging down from the ceiling, or a particular bang sound when the drone hit it. But besides that, it worked really well. So again, that's both the robot and the drone. And what I've done now is I did this a few times because I've got more than one drone. I did a bit of a crop dusting drone test. So I had one drone going one direction, another drone going another direction, and I thought, I wonder if I can form this sort of virtual grid going from 1 meter down up to about 10 meters and just have the drones cross each other. And I did, and that worked really, really nicely. So again, you're only limited by your imagination, and that's what programming is all about. If you've got a thing that you want something to do it, then go for it and program it. Or in my case, I got the robots to do certain things and the drones to do certain things as well. So I'm yet to fly it over the house because I don't want to sort of have him park on the top of the roof and not be able to get him. But
Yeah.
really exciting to be able to program your own drone.
And I was gonna say, if there are any listeners that was keen to get one of these products, is it something that they can get through the Vision store or?
Only Code Jumper. So we only sell
Okay.
Jumper. I mean, we also sell Apple products. So if you're after an iPad, an iPhone, we certainly do that. But
Yeah.
the drone, I purchased that through the Apple online store.
Yeah.
And the Dash Robot, I think I bought it through Amazon as well. But if you just stick in, and my Amazon speaker's just gone off. So if you hear something talking in a minute, it's my Amazon speaker. But look, it wasn't too expensive. I think the people that actually sell the drone was called Little Bird.
I found a few
And
profiles
let
from
me
this
just
account.
reach over the back of
If
my
you
speaker
hear
here
them
and
just say,
turn that off. Sorry, guys. As you can tell, this is a live demo because otherwise you wouldn't be able to hear my drone talking. I mean, my speaker talking. But yeah, so look, Little Bird were the ones that sold the Dash Robot. But just search for Dash Robot and you're fine. The actual drone itself it's called the Tello, Tello EDU drone. There's a few drones from DJ drones, but it's the Tello EDU drone you want. And again, that's specifically used for education.
And I want to move on now because we've talked a lot about drones, and we've had a good sense of Code Jumper and Ballyyard. I know that we're also keen to provide some advice around what Script Jaws is and how people can utilize being, I guess, good or masters at Script Jaws. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So if at the end of the day, because the reason why you learn coding is to do different things. So at the end of the day, if you don't want to become a proper, or not a proper, but if you don't want to become a programmer, to use Xcode, which is the main programming language that you use to build apps on a Mac to produce your apps on your iPhone or your iPad, or even just the Mac itself. But the nice thing about programming is that functionality, or what you learn, extends to doing other programming things, and that includes what's called JAWS scripting. So when we think about JAWS scripting, we're literally telling the screen reader, in this case JAWS for Windows, JAWS, what to do. And this becomes particularly powerful when you're looking at third-party applications, that we call them. So let's say rather you're in a workplace or an education institution and you're not using Microsoft Office, Internet Explorer, Microsoft Outlook and so on. You're using, Joe Bob's Brownie Services database application from Whoop Whoop that nobody's ever heard of. And of course, what sometimes happens with screen readers is that you load up the program, you run JAWS, and then you try and tab across the screen or use the application, and it says things like edit, button, combo box, stuff like that, which means absolutely nothing to you. You think, well, where am I? Am I on the toolbar? Am I on a form? Am I supposed to put in my username? And what JAWS scripting allows you to do is to say, okay, JAWS, when you see this control on the screen, whether it's an edit field or a button, I want you to do a certain thing. I want you to read out some text. I want you to label the button so it's called so-and-so, or I want you to do other things as well. So you're literally turning that particular thing into an accessible application. And that's a really powerful thing, because as far as I know at the moment, there's only about 1 or 2 people in Australia that actually code and script for JAWS. So, you think about one of our main aims at Vision Australia is to get people jobs. And one of the difficult things about getting a job and holding a job is accessibility. So if you can go into a workplace and say, yes, I can script this application to make it accessible for somebody, then you've just been able to person to, one, get a job and maintain the job. And that's very powerful. And then they're coming back quickly about something as simple as Siri. Remember good old Siri shortcuts, where you can say to shortcuts in Siri, I want you to do the following steps to perform a specific function. And again, that's programming. So again, programming can mean a lot of things, but for us at Vision Australia, JAWS scripting in particular is extremely powerful. And who knows, you could be a scripter one day and start being able to help out not only in employment, but in education as well.
It's great that you mentioned how, getting into something like scripting JAWS is such a lucrative or like an important role, especially if there's only one person that you're aware of that is doing it, and it has such broad appeal. Because you are absolutely right, accessibility is a huge block for employees who are blind or have low vision. Let's talk about there's other examples of coding, such as web development. What are some of the areas where people could get into applying their skills in coding into this field?
Absolutely. So people might remember at Vision Australia, we've got a digital access team, and their job is to go out and test websites. And when they test websites, they just don't say your website's not working, which is not very useful. They say your website's not working because the code of what you're using is not working. So here's the code you're using, and here's an example of you being able to fix the code by doing this. So again, and we call these people web developers. The web developer's job that tests his website is to give people code examples on how to fix it. And again, so if you became a web developer, not only could you build your own websites, but you could probably get a job as a web accessibility testing person to test websites for accessibility. Because sometimes people think, oh, I only test websites because people only use them for your screen readers. Well, no, web accessibility is all about different modes of accessing websites. So it's blind, it's low vision, it's physical, it's motor, it's cognitive, it's all the different things that people have to do to access a website, whether they're have a disability or not. So that's one particular example. The other one, which I know is it almost sounds a bit ancient, but back in my day, I was going to say, back about 10 years ago, we used to write a lot of word macros. And word macros are again, a simple way of, let's say, for example, you want a person to be able to properly produce a form, which has, I don't know, person's first name, last name, their postcode, their mobile phone number, and a few other bits and pieces of information. Now, rather than saying, oh, you've got to put it in a particular format, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, what a word macro does, it says, okay, you just put in the information that we need, and then the macro will take care of the rest. We'll put it in the right spot. We'll use the proper font. We'll use proper tabular information on the page for you. All you have to do is just fill in this form on the screen in Word, for example. So there are lots of other ways of doing particular coding. And the other thing about the coding is that, it's a good way to get employment. And I should say, today we've been talking sort of more about Apple coding. So we've been talking about Swift Playgrounds. I mentioned Xbox extremely briefly on the Mac, JAWS scripting, web development. But just remember, there's also coding on other platforms as well, particularly Windows itself as well. So you're not just stuck, if you like, on Apple stuff. If you don't want to get into the iOS or iPad arena,
Mm-hmm.
you can also get involved in other places as well. So programming is one way of getting involved and getting yourself a job. So for skilled people, getting involved in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, learning how to code, joining robot clubs, drone clubs, computer clubs, doing some sort of programming stuff at TAFE University.
Mm-hmm.
My son produces music on his electronic music synthesizer, And he even has to program that because he has to program the synthesizer to produce the music he wants. It has to be at a certain tempo, certain notes, certain octave, all that sort of stuff he has to program. So even from a musician point of view, he's programming as well. So anything that you have to do something with over and over again is a really good reason to program.
It is incredible the broad appeal and programming and coding does have, that it absolutely touches us in so many different ways. Like you mentioned, from grabbing a coffee from your $3,500 machine to computers, the obvious stuff, right through to music. It is a very, very a key learning that I've certainly taken away from. Before we wrap up, I wanted to firstly congratulate you on doing such a good job to get through so much useful content, specifically because especially because you have had a very, very early start this morning. I understand that you went to the 2020 Worldwide Developers Conference. Was that at 2 a.m.
I had to get
start
up.
for you, Deb? What
Yeah,
time was it?
I had to get up at 2. Well, I got up at 2 a.m. and it was at 3 o'clock for 2 hours.
Wow.
And
Great.
it was the Worldwide Developers Conference, which is all about what's happening with the new version of iOS. So it's iOS 14, Watch version 7, tvOS 14, and of course Mac OS. And it was an interesting thing to actually finish off on, actually. And I almost forgot about talking about that today. So thank you for reminding me. That's because I'm getting tired. Is the fact that the new version of Mac coming out, which is now going to be called Mac OS 11, previously called Mac OS 10, is because Apple's moving from what they call an Intel-based computer to Apple's own silicon chip, which means all the developers that attended the conference today, and this was just for the keynote because the conference goes for the whole week, they've got to now learn different ways of getting code that runs on an Intel computer on the new Apple Silicon. Now, luckily, you can run both systems quite nicely. There's different ways in Xcode to do both of them. But I just thought it's interesting how things change and move on. But one thing that I thought was really funny, which has got nothing to do with the coding type of stuff, is the new Mac system. So the current version of the Mac, it has different names there. You've got things like Yosemite and all sort of different landmarks in California. Well, the current one's now going to be called, the new one's going to be called Mac OS Big Sur. Now, as a screen reader user myself, you would imagine, I've got no idea what Big Sur is. It's actually a mountain, by the way, in California. Now, I would imagine, assuming that was Big Sur, I would be going S-I-R when I was writing it down, as in, hello, sir. But it's not. It's actually Big S-U-R. So when I was talking to one of my friends at Apple this morning, I just said, it's going to be funny. All these people that use screen readers are just going to think it's the word S-I-R. So they're going to say things like, have you been developing or have you seen the new Big S-I-R yet? And everybody will go, I don't know what you're talking about. It's yes, you are. So I thought that was just a bit of a screen reader joke. But yeah, no, it's really exciting this morning. Like I said, iOS, all the iOSs and the Mac is all out today. All the developers have got their hands on them. If you're a beta tester like I am, I'm beta testing against accessibility across all those different devices, the Apple Watch, the iPhone, the iPad, and the Mac. So I get to play for the next 3 months until when it's commercially available around about September, October, when hopefully we get new things like the iPhone 12 and so on. So really interesting times. And it was really funny that I thought it was quite peculiar that the day we were talking about coding or learning coding through gaming, that we also had the Apple Developers Conference on the same day.
Some really, really valuable insights from that course. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have a question from Ben, and I think it's a good one to know. Does Vision Australia run any courses around, I guess, around coding, programming, a lot of what we've spoken about today?
Not at the moment, we don't. But if we get interest, then yes, we can. So it's sort of what's an old expression, the chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
If we get interest, then yes, we can run coding workshops. If you want to find out more about things like Xcode, Swift Playgrounds, the Battleland apps, the Code Jumper, that stuff that I talked about that the Vision Store does sell, the robots, the drones, and everything else, you can actually ring up the Adaptive Technology Help Desk at Vision Australia. And that's the main number. So that's the 1300 847 466. Or if you happen to be trendy, 1300 Vision. So again, it's 1300 847 466. And just ask to the AT help desk, and they can talk to you about, what it's like to use Xcode on a Mac, what it's like to use, Swift playgrounds with speech or braille, or any other type of stuff that I've talked about today. And there's a lot of content on the internet about coding as well, across basically everything I talked about today. And also keep in mind that there's also the Apple Accessibility main help desk. So if you started using Swift Playgrounds or Xcode and you got stuck, you could also ring up the Apple Accessibility help desk. And the number for that is 1300 365 083. That number again is 1300 365 083. And that's a dedicated help desk, not only for just asking about accessibility, but maybe also getting some pointers on where you can find out more about accessing all the stuff that I talked about today from an accessibility point of view.
Thanks so much, David. And if you are reaching out to our AT help desk, you can also send them an email, and that is at help@visionaustralia.org. Thanks so much, David, for such a interesting session around coding and programming. I also wanted to mention to all the listeners out there that Vision Australia is offering services via telehealth, which is conducted through phone, video conferencing, email, or a combination. And you can again contact our AT help desk if you'd like support in getting set up for telehealth. That number again is 1300 84 74 66, or send us an email at info@visionaustralia.org. Yeah, for more information. Perfect. The next check-in and chat is about exercising in isolation, and that's on Thursday, the 25th at 2 p.m. for those residing in New South Wales, Vic, Queensland, and Tas. 1:30 for those for folks in South Australia and Northern Territory, and 12 p.m. for folks in WA. Christina, Vision Australia's physiotherapist, will be our guest speaker. David, before we wrap up, is there any last words that you'd like to share with our listeners?
No, look, I would say the only thing about coding is that it's not hard. Yes, it can be hard if you want to make it that way, but for me, it's just have fun. I mean, because the main thing about coding is it's the journey that actually counts, not the fact that you may or may not get there in the end. It's all the fun about finding out something new. So whether it's using Swift Playgrounds, learning to fly I was going to say learning to fly a robot. Learning to fly a drone, to have your robot roll around the ground. And there's all sorts of other robots as well that I didn't get through today. There's also some music stuff. There's one particular one called a Skoog. That's SKOOG. And you can program the Skoog to do different music things. It's like a little box that you can tap and thump, and it makes different things, different sounds, and that sort of stuff. So like I said before, you're only limited by your imagination. There's a lot of stuff out there. Swift Playgrounds is a good starting point. Backland is at beginning stuff. As I said, Code Jumper was more for education institutions. But, my basic thing is have fun. And that's why I said today was learning to code through gaming, because for me, we spend too much of our time being too serious and getting a bit overwhelmed, particularly at the moment. So, have fun and learn to code.
It's a pretty good life tip, I think, David, just to have fun and take one step at a time. I think that's a really good point. Thank you so much to all our listeners. We've absolutely loved chatting with you today. Bye.